This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
The first week of NFL free agency now almost officially in the books, and most of the key dominoes have fallen outside of Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, and a couple of other key veterans. So now we can kind of dig in and say, okay, what was the plan here for a lot of teams? Identify whose stock is up, whose stock is down as we get set for the rest of this NFL offseason. Today, we're going to dive in and talk about what the Steelers could look like if they were to sign Rodgers. Then we'll dive into a couple of teams who I have some questions about the way they've handled things so far. Dive into some stock down there. A team that I like, but was a bit underwhelmed with what they've done so far. And my favorite futures bet at FanDuel Sportsbook right now based on what a team has done so far this offseason. Welcome on into Covering the Spread, a FanDuel Research podcast. My name is JimSannes. I am a managing editor for FanDuel Research, here to break down my thoughts on the opening week of NFL free agency, detailing stock up and stock down on what teams have done thus far. We also did talk about free agency earlier on this week. Megan Payton joined me. She gave her thoughts on what we've seen so far, outlook for the Chicago Bears with their rebuild offensive line, whether Sam Darnold can duplicate what Geno Smith did in Seattle. We'll talk about the Vikings with J.J. McCarthy. We talked about that with Megan back on Wednesday. That is up on the Covering the Spread podcast feed right now, but you can also find that on the FanDuel Football Betting YouTube page, which is where all of our NFL shows go. So check out the FanDuel Football Betting YouTube page for that, but also the Covering the Spread podcast feed. As for that podcast feed, busy schedule for next week. We have 4 separate shows coming your way, all talking about college basketball. On Monday will be our yearly breakdown of the bracket with Dr. Ed Feng. You can check out that, his thoughts on the full bracket. Ed wrote the book on how to win your pools. That'll be on Monday. Riley Thomas of FanDuel Research will also join me there, giving his thoughts in the men's bracket. Women's bracket breakdown comes Tuesday. Aiden Cotter of FanDuel Research join me then. And then Aiden and Riley, you can join me on Wednesday and Thursday as well, breaking down their thoughts on the games for Thursday and Friday. So 4 shows next week here on the Covering the Spread podcast feed, breaking down men's and women's tournament games. Make sure you tune in for all those throughout next week. Subscribe to Covering the Spread to get those ads there posted. Again, leave us a 5-star rating and review if you like what you hear. One of the best parts about the tournament is when an underdog takes down a powerhouse. And right now, those upsets can get even better because all this week on FanDuel, if your underdog bet wins, you'll land even more winnings with a profit boost. This is your chance to ride with the long shots, the scrappy teams, the ones that refuse to go quietly. When you join FanDuel, there is no better time. The app is easy to use, and when you win, you'll get paid instantly. Visit America's #1 sportsbook today and back your dog of the day with a profit boost, because after all, anything can happen in March. Must be 21 plus. And present in select states or 18 plus and present in DC. Opt-in required. Wager of at least plus 100 odds required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable profit boost tokens. Restrictions apply, including any token expiration and max wager amount. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Or visit FanDuel.com/RG. Call 1-888-79-7777 or visit ccpg.org/Chat, Connecticut. Visit MD Gambling Health Oregon, Maryland. Hope is here. Visit Gambling Helpline MA.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Let's begin things here by talking about the one big key domino still have to fall here in NFL free agency, and that is Aaron Rodgers, because I still think he can play. Now, if you look at the numbers last year, they were not good. He was a below average passer based on number fires, EPA metrics. It was not a good year for Rodgers. The overall numbers were not good. But that offensive line for the Jets was pretty banged up throughout the year, also kind of old. Things did get better once Olu Fashanu got in the starting lineup and then came back to earth a bit once he got hurt again at left tackle. But now got an extra year removed from the Achilles injury for Aaron Rodgers. So I kind of want to look at the Steelers and see, okay, let's say Rodgers does go there. What would expectations be for them with Rodgers in play versus what they'd be if they were to re-sign Russell Wilson? Now, With Rodgers in there, I'm being pretty conservative with my projection for the Steelers, and I've got them at 7.6 wins if I put him in there as their quarterback right now. That sounds low because it's Mike Tomlin, of course, has never had a losing season. So it's like, okay, 7.6, that feels low. And I do agree that does feel low because they have the tools to be competitive if they were to add him. They've got, I think, some pretty good youth along their offensive line. Obviously, the injuries kind of robbed us of what that offensive line could have been last year, but I think they've got some pretty solid players there now, finally. They've got better pass catchers now, George Pickens and DK Metcalf. The defense has upside as well, so I'd be pretty interested to see what that team would look like. Now, I would think that the market would be higher on the Steelers than I would be at 7.6 wins. Maybe that would result in betting an under. And I would have some hesitation in doing that just because I do think Rodgers can still play. Infrastructure for the Steelers is pretty good. I think Arthur Smith is a solid offensive coordinator personally. I know he gets people mad, but like he made a Marcus Mariota-led offense pretty efficient and Desmond Ridder with the Falcons a couple years ago. So I still think he's pretty good and the infrastructure is still good. I just want to be sure I don't get too high on Rodgers, despite the fact I do still think he can play. But they're a fascinating team to watch. So as a football fan, I do want that to happen because I think it'd be fascinating to watch Mike Tomlin paired with Aaron Rodgers and a good team around him, but not really sure where I'd settle in from a betting perspective until we do see win totals posted at FanDuel Sportsbook later on this offseason. I also want to discuss two of the biggest losers in free agency so far, according to my numbers. Those are the Texans and the Niners. Let's start with the Texans because it's a really curious, some may say bad, plan up front for them with the offensive line. Because yes, the offensive line was bad last year, but their response to that was cutting their two guards and trading away the one good player they had up front in Laramie Tunsil. The guys they brought in to replace those players were available for a reason. Like there is a reason these guys were available to be had, whether it be on cheap free agency contracts or via 6th-round picks via trade. There are still some decent offensive linemen on the market, but they come with injury concerns. They come with age concerns, middling effectiveness recently. It's just really odd that they're dedicating resources and trading for CJ Gardner-Johnson to help the defense, which was already really good, rather than trying to make life easier on CJ Stroud. So I was pretty optimistic about the Texans heading into this offseason because I like CJ Stroud a lot. I think D'Amico Ryan's a good coach. I think this defense is good too. Nico Collins healthy is good. Christian Kirkmove I thought was solid, but they have really killed that enthusiasm really fast. I currently have the Texans at 9.4 wins in my win total model. Part of that is thanks to an easy-ish schedule. They do get a bump about 2-3 wins due to their schedule, but they're just 14th in my power rankings. And when you give them a quarterback as good as CJ Stroud, I feel like they should be higher than 14th. I'm just worried about the way that they've handled things so far up front and what that plan looks like. They are still the top team in the AFC South. The Jags have taken some steps back too. I'm not super high on the Colts. It's just, I think that they're there. The Texans are due to a lack of competition more than anything else. I want to see more than this plan up front to be dependent on rookies to keep CJ Stroud comfortable in the pocket for the Texans. So I wanted to be behind them once again. I loved them 2 years ago when Stroud was a rookie. Still skeptical right now and have not seen a lot of reasons for hope with the Texans. So if you look at my model, they are the number 2 team as far as the team that has gotten the biggest downgrade so far in free agency. The team with the biggest downgrade thus far has been the San Francisco 49ers. They have lost a lot of key contributors. And as a result of that, their win total projection has gone down more than a half win for me since the start of free agency. It has gone down specifically 0.56 wins, which is the most of any team. It's just so many starting caliber players who have left this team. And it's a lot of the guys who kind of formulated the identity of this team. Now, they have some answers in place. They've got Ricky Pearsall step up for Deebo Samuel, who's not included in this because he was traded before free agency began. They signed some defensive players to replace the guys they lost there. They have some answers in place, but that's a lot. It's a cluster of starting caliber players to leave this team. Now, with that said, I do still have the win total projection for the Niners at 10.9. That is almost entirely due to their schedule. They get a full win bump based on their schedule for next year. It's actually the easiest schedule in the entire league because their cross-divisional teams are the NFC South and the AFC South. So they get a pretty plush schedule there, but then also because they finished last in their division, they face the Browns as their additional AFC team. So there are reasons to be down on the Niners, and I definitely am. But the schedule is doing a lot of work to keep them afloat with a decent win total despite that. I may need to downgrade them still just because they've had like cluster losses. They've lost a lot of key guys. So maybe I do wind up downgrading them at some point. But as of now, still relatively high on them. I don't feel great about that. But the schedule really does help keep the Niners in a decent spot, despite the fact they've had a lot of key losses so far. So between the Texans and the Niners, I feel better about where the Niners stand as of right now, despite the fact they've gotten a bigger downgrade in my model since the start of free agency. One team that has a lot of resources and has underwhelmed me a bit is the New England Patriots because they made some good moves on defense. They added Milton Williams. He is still pretty young. He's a very athletic player. Finally broke out last year with the Eagles. Obviously, they didn't need him, given all the depth they have along the interior or defensive line. So it's not like he was in free agency because he wasn't good. It was because they had answers up front in Philadelphia. They added Carlton Davis, pretty good pair, Christian Gonzalez. Harold Landry is solid. So the defensive side for the Patriots is very good. I'm just annoyed with how little they've done on the offensive side of things. They still haven't added juice to their offense. And that's kind of the key thing that they've been missing on that side of things. Like Pop Douglas is fine, but there's not a lot of juice in this offense. And if you got Drake May, a guy with a very live arm who can scramble around, make some stuff happen, that's what I want. I want playmakers on offense who can take May and boost him up. Now, I don't think this is due to the lack of trying. I'm pretty sure they made an aggressive offer for Chris Godwin. I'm sure that they would have been aggressive with trying to add offensive linemen, but there just wasn't a lot available in the market. But we've seen some teams navigate around that. Washington, specifically, in a very similar spot where they had a lot of cap space. So they brought in Laramie Tunsil, brought in Deebo Samuel. I'm questioning why the Patriots haven't done similar things to build up the infrastructure around Drake May. May was impressive last year without the infrastructure. So maybe he doesn't need to have an amazing core around him, but I'd want more in there to make things easier on Drake May. I don't want it to have to be Superman in order to make this offense be good. I do still have the Patriots at 6.4 wins in my model for this year, which is not a bad number by any means. And the defensive gains they've made has definitely helped things. They brought in some legit talent there. I just wanted to see them be more aggressive in trying to improve the infrastructure around May on offense. And it probably would have had to have been via trades. Maybe they can still add someone via trade. Honestly, like you look at the guys available, like Cooper Kupp's available, but like that's not what they need in offense. They need juice. And Cooper Kupp in 2025 is not that guy. So even if they do have Cooper Kupp, that's not going to do a whole lot for me to sway me to say I should be higher on the Patriots. I want to buy into them before we see the Drake May breakout. I haven't seen enough there to say they're a team that I want to buy into. Again, it's not their fault. There wasn't a lot in free agency they could do, but I think they should have been more aggressive in the trade market to do things that the Commanders have done in order to make things easier on Drake May. I'm very intrigued once again by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I wanted to discuss them here quickly because they did lose Liam Cohen, but they re-signed Chris Godwin, which is a pretty big get for them. So although they're neutral in my win total model since the start of free agency, it could have been worse had a guy like Godwin left. So I find that pretty interesting. You go back to last year, and according to NFL Next Gen stats, the Buccaneers' EPA per play on offense actually increased after Chris Godwin's injury last year. To me, that says other guys like Jalen McMillan stepped up to help fill that void, and Bucky Irving as well. That means that they are a better team now, as things stand in March of 2025, than they were when Chris Godwin got banged up last year. And now you add Godwin back into that mix to build upon those gains. I think they'll be efficient on offense even without Cohen as the OC. They added Hassan Reddick on defense. Really bad year last year. The holdout happened and then wasn't effective once he joined the Jets. Could be an interesting buy low kind of guy, though. But the offense will be efficient. I feel very firm in saying that. Todd Bowles consistently generates good defense too. So if I trust their head coach to get us a good defense, maybe if the secondary isn't as banged up this year, they can improve defensively as well. And the reason the Buccaneers are interesting to me is because they are currently 16-1 to win the NFC at FanDuel Sportsbook. They're behind a bunch of teams, and given the playoff position they'll likely be in, where they have a pretty good shot to win their division, I find that a bit light. They are 16-1 versus the Chicago Bears are 18-1. The Seahawks with Darnold are 21-1, as are the Cardinals. I think the Buccaneers should be closer to this tier with the Rams and the Commanders than they are to this tier with the Bears and the Seahawks, because that offense will be good. The defense under Todd Bowles could always improve, and the teams above them do have their flaws as well. I think the Bucs have the upside to win the NFC and go to the Super Bowl. Hasn't been a flashy offseason for them by any means, but sometimes just retaining your studs can be a good thing, and that's what they've done so far this year. So when I look at all the futures markets right now at FanDuel Sportsbook, to me, the best bet on the board is to take the Buccaneers to win the NFC. That is currently 16-1 at FanDuel Sportsbook. So again, my favorite future right now is that Buccaneers, given they retained Chris Godwin, they were efficient without Godwin last year, and now add him back in the fold. I think that's a good recipe for them to show some upside in year number 3 under Baker Mayfield. That is all that we have here for today on Covering the Spread. Again, if you want some more free agency breakdowns, check out our show with Megan Payton from Wednesday, both on the FanDuel Football Betting YouTube page, but also on the Covering the Spread podcast feed. Next week, big week here on the Covering the Spread podcast feed. Bracket breakdown with Dr. Ed Fang and Riley Thomas on Monday. Women's bracket breakdown with Aiden Cotter on Tuesday, and then breakdowns of the games on Thursday and Friday coming up on Wednesday and Thursday as well. So 4 shows next week on the podcast feed. Search for Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. Hit subscribe, and if you like what you hear, leave us a 5-star rating and review as well. If you got any questions for me, I'm on both X and Blue Sky at JimSannes. You can find FanDuel Research on X at FanDuel Research. Big thank you to our YouTube producer, Justin Lane, for his work on the video side of things. Thank you, Justin, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck to you if you're betting anything across this weekend, whether it be Players Championships, some college basketball conference tournaments, or anything else. We'll talk to you once again next week to get you set for tourney time. This has been Covering the Spread, a FanDuel Research podcast.